All right. So I'll quickly do so this video is particularly for liquidity inducement. So as you already know, liquidity inducement, or you can just call it liquidity, is the first valid pullback a market makes after a break of structure or market structure shift. And when we talk about a first valid pullback, it has to do with after your market structure shift or your break of structure. That first pullback is what we mean by inducement. And for an inducement or liquidity to be valid, it has to cover at least 50% of the breakout. So I'll do a quick example before we head on the chart example. Let me just do a quick illustration before we head over to the chart. Okay, so okay, let's see this as okay. Let's say market was on a bullish scenario. You have using your market structure, you have a process whereby the market gives you a higher high and then your higher low. Have a higher high and then the higher low, a higher high, then a higher low, a higher high, and then a lower low. That lower low right there is automatically your market structure shift. So right now we are not this video is not for market structure. So if you haven't watched the video on market structure, you can get back and then watch it. So this particular one is for liquidity. So when I say liquidity is the very valid pullback a market makes after a breakout, after a break of structure or market structure shift. It has to do with after this breakout right here, you have to see a pullback. You have to see a pullback, and that pullback you're expecting should cover at least 50%. When we talk about 50%, after reaching this zone right here, it might not really be this zone, it might even get into the zone. After this pullback, it has to cover at least 50% of the retracement. That's after coming back right here, it should cover at least 50% of this pullback that got into this zone. Or it can also cover 100%. That's something like this. And also it's also possible for it to be over 100%. So but for it to be valid, it has to cover at least 50%, and it has to retrace to at least 50% after the pullback before getting to your POI. So that's basically what I mean by the first valid pullback. It has to cover your first it has to cover at least 50% of the pullback. So in this scenario, this is where your inducement is. This pullback right here is where we call the inducement or liquidity. That's your liquidity zone right there. So also um for the bearish scenario, you can just do this vice versa. Then let me just quickly do it. Um You have a scenario whereby the market keeps giving lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs. You have a lower low and then a lower high. You have a lower low right here. Then you have this as your market structure shift. Having that as a market structure shift, you know, okay, let's just mark this market structure shift. And then just like I said earlier, it has to be the first valid pullback. The first valid pullback, it has to retrace here. This is the pullback. And even after the pullback, it has to, for it to be valid, it has to cover at least 50%, which is either somewhere here, can come back here now to trigger your point of interest. Okay? It can come back here now to trigger your point of interest before moving. And also it can also not just stop there, cover at least 100% right there before coming to your point of interest. And also, it doesn't also stop there. It can also cover above 100% of your pullback. That's above 100%. It means it can also pass, it can also exit this zone and then continue the move with kind of a break of structure before getting to your uh, point of interest. Before getting to your point of interest and then give you the main move from there. So with all this, what we're really looking at is it has liquidity has to be the first valid pullback, which is right here. It has to be this zone. The pullback is there, and then it has to cover at least 50% or 100%, and even more than 100% before getting to your point of interest. So that's just it. We'll mark here as the liquidity zone. So that's just it for liquidity inducement. You can mark there as the liquidity. And also, let's just do a quick example using the break of structure scenario. This one I'm showing you is just for the market structure shift, or you can also call it a change of character. So for a scenario for a break of structure example, let's use this. Okay, so you had for the bullish break of structure, you had this higher high, you had this higher low, you had this higher high. For here with this higher high, this zone right here, you've just seen here as your break of structure. This is the first valid pullback after the break of structure. Don't forget. Okay, let me just map it out so you know where I'm talking about. You have here as your break of structure, and then this right here is the first valid pullback. And also, just like this scenario where I said it has to cover at least 50% of the pullback, which is it has to cover at least to this point, or even to this point, or even to more than 100% of the zone before getting to your POI. That's what I mean right there for the bullish break of structure. Then for the bearish breakout structure, you can see the market giving you a series of lower highs and then lower lows, lower highs and then a lower low here. Giving you that lower low, you can see it has already caused this break of structure right here. And causing that break of structure, before price should get back to this your point of interest at this zone, you are expecting it to give you a pullback, which this first valid pullback is what we are talking about. It's not just a pullback, the pullback has to be valid. This is the pullback right here. This pullback right here is where your liquidity is. That's where your liquidity is. The first valid pullback, the fact that it got back to this zone is the liquidity. Okay, let me also mark for this. I forgot to mark it out on this one. So also mark it out on this one. So after the pullback, for it to be valid, we said it has to cover at least 50% after the pullback of the pullback, sorry. So it has to get here or here or even more than the 100% before getting back to your point of interest and then going your direction. So that's just it for liquidity inducement. Okay, let me quickly rush in and then let's do a quick chart example of all this. Let me show you an example on the chart. And so let's use uh, past results so you understand and see how it works. Uh, on my network. Okay, so um, okay, so Um,